Yeah, good morning everyone. So last session we learned how to create Angular workspace and Angular application. Were you able to design this? You created workspace application, you designed, able to create it, right? How to create a workspace and application. Already we saw to create workspace, ng, new workspace, create application, we have to set it to false. To create an application, ng generate application and application name. We created some shopping application. Right? And to start project, we have to use ng serve. Ng serve project is equal to, what is it? Shopping. That's what we have to do. Right? This is what we done. And we created this. How we can work with this, we already learned. Now, in the project, how the project starts, the flow I explained. How the project starts, the basic flow we discussed. Now, the first thing you have to learn, let's open the workspace. In Visual Studio Code, this is the workspace file, and we have workspace Angular, workspace Angular, and in this workspace Angular we have a project. So in this project, application starts with which page? Index. Index starts with which component? Index starts with a component called app component. So today we will see how we can create a simple application. For that, first you need to know a concept, Angular components. This is the first thing you have to learn in Angular. Actually, what is a component? Nothing but component. Component is a template. Technically, component is a template. So what a template comprises of? It comprises of number one, it contains presentation, it contains styles, and it contains logic. A component contains three things: the presentation, styles, and logic. So for example, as I already told you, components are very common. Yesterday I told you that Netflix have accordion component and Amazon have carousel component. Usually component actually comprises of presentation, styles, and logic. Presentation is designed in HTML. Styles are defined using CSS, and logic is defined using TypeScript. We use TypeScript here, no? Angular uses TypeScript. So a component contains three things: the presentation and the styles and logic. Actually, Angular components advantage is we can reuse the components. We can easily use the component anywhere we want without redesigning. For example, I showed you, if you see Netflix website, in this Netflix website, they are having a register form. In this, they are having a register form. And this register form is again at the bottom. That means they don't copy and paste. That means they designed at the top, same they want at the bottom. Copy paste generally you do when you learn up to HTML. If you have knowledge of HTML, up to HTML, wherever you need that screen, you actually copy and paste. That is not correct. In web development, we should actually, in software projects, they will tell you one principle. In software projects, they will tell you a principle. We call that principle as dry. Dry principle is, in every project they mention specially. Dry means don't repeat yourself. Officially, this is written in every project document. Officially it is written. That means I should never see any set of code written again. We should not rewrite the code. We should reuse the code. Why you learn OOP concept? Right? I should never see some set of logic you are writing again and again. I should see that you are reusing the logic. You are writing only once and you are writing everywhere. So don't repeat yourself. Dry is a very common principle. In software projects, every project in the world follows this principle. Strictly. Your testing team will report that as a problem if you are repeating. When you send your code for testing, your testing team will report that as a problem, that this is repeating. So that is the reason you have to design components. What is advantage of component? We can reuse. But how to design component? Actually, remember, component means component is technically a TypeScript class. Component is technically a TypeScript class. In TypeScript, classes are there. Component is technically a TypeScript class. That means what we do, we will use like this. That means export class and class name, some home component. Why I used the word export, you know already. Why? Because we are using module system. In module system, anything you written in a file is not accessible outside the file. To make it accessible outside, you have to mark as export. Already we learned this in TypeScript. Now we are designing a TypeScript class, but this is an ordinary TypeScript class. How Angular thinks that it is component? It is an ordinary TypeScript class. How Angular thinks that this is not an ordinary class, this is a component? Because class is used for designing components, for designing services, for designing we call pipes. In Angular, component, not only component, a lot of things are designed by using class. How Angular knows that this class is a service, this class is a component, this class is a pipe? How it knows? So for that, actually, every component class uses a decorator called component. It have a component decorator. It uses a decorator called component. So this is called decorator. By using this decorator, we can also call as a directive. Decorator or directive. So every component uses a decorator. This decorator will tell whether it is a component or a service or a pipe. That means how do we do? We write like this actually. Export class home component. Let me first finish this. Here, this is ordinary class. How it becomes a component? We have to add a decorator called component like this. This makes this class as a component. People have an habit of writing this in a new line. But actually it is not new line, it is continuous. Just for clarity's sake, people have an habit of writing in a new line. So it is a marker used for a class. Now this class becomes a component. So now Angular can understand that it is a component. It can understand that it is a component. So component is a ordinary TypeScript class, but it gets the component behavior from this component. And important is component decorator. Component decorator is defined in Angular core library. Angular core library. That means in order to use this decorator, you have to import it from that library. That means you know what to do now. How to import? Import. What to import? Component from which location? Angular core. We have to import it. After importing, we have to use it. Understood? Component. And here we have to tell export class home component, and we need to design. This is how it finally looks. Not finally, still some more there. That means in order to use this component decorator, first you have to import the decorator. How to import the decorator? By using this library, you can import it. Okay. Now, as I told you, as per the rules of component, every component contains three things. What are those? Markup, styles, and logic. So currently in the class you can have logic. Generally class contains logic because class is logical entity now. Class is a logical entity. In the class you can have logic, methods, properties, they can be in the class. Now where is markup and style? As per the rules, every component needs markup and every component needs some styles. Styles are optional, but markup is compulsory. Styles not mandatory, but markup is compulsory. That means now here, so every component must have markup. Every component must have markup, which you can define in the component decorator. That means in the component decorator, component decorator, this component decorator uses some attributes. It uses some properties. Object means key and value. What are the properties it can use? First property is, so it will have a property called selector. It will have a property selector. Selector is a string type. And you have another property template. Template is also a string type. We have a property called template URL. It is also a string type. We have a property called styles. Styles is an array of string. Styles is an array of string. And we have style URLs. It is an array of string. It is also an array of string. So usually component contains lot of details. That means a component uses all these details. It's not mandatory to use all these details every time, depending on situation. But very important details are selector. Selector is nothing but it defines the name used to access component. You designed a component. What is the component class name I given? Component class name I given as home. But component is not accessed by this name. Component is given with a class name called home component, but it is not accessed by this name. If you want to access the component and use it, every component have a selector. We have to access by selector name. And very important, every selector must have prefix app. It must have prefix app. That means how to define selector. So we have to say selector, and it should be, selector must be app home like this. You have seen yesterday in index page, there is app root. In index page, there is app root, right? You can see in index page, there is app root. This is actually selector. That is the selector for app component. If you are designing your own components, your component must have a selector. Components are accessed and used anywhere by using selector. So selector is compulsory. Okay. Next important is we have template. Template means it defines the markup. It defines the markup to render. It defines the markup to render means what you want to render when it is called. When anybody accessed the component, what to return? Presentation. Template indicates markup. Markup means presentation. So generally, so that means we write template like this. Template. It is a string. In that we write the markup, what you want to present. Understood? Your complete markup you can write here, what you want to present. Whenever you access this component, it will render this heading. It can be heading or a complete page. Here currently markup means directly you have to mention what to render. There is another technique. You can design in a separate HTML file and you can use it here. Either you design here or design in a separate page and use it here. So for that we have template URL. Template URL means it defines the page name that contains markup. Understood? If you don't want to design markup here, there is already designed in a separate HTML page. I want to use it here. Then you can use template URL. Template URL, it uses, so home component .html like this it will use. That means whatever the HTML you designed, that HTML comes here. There are two options. You design HTML directly in a component or design HTML in a separate HTML file and bring it and use it. That depends on your requirement. Another option is styles. Styles are nothing but, so it defines set of style attributes and values. What styles you want to affect? You know how to write CSS now? So styles are written like this. For heading, I want to apply color. Then remember, it is a string array. That means here I have to write heading to what effects you want. For example, for heading 2, I want color as red like this. Suppose another, for paragraph, what effects you want. Like this, we can add multiple styles and keep that in an array. So styles indicates these options. Now another technique is there. Style URLs. It is nothing but if you plan to design styles in a separate style sheet, you have CSS files now. If you want separate style sheet and you designed and you want to use that style sheet, generally what we can do, it defines the external style sheets. Understood? That means how do we define? We have to use style URLs, and here we have to keep that home.component.css. You can have multiple CSS files also, because you know that in HTML, a page can use more than one CSS. It can use more than one CSS, so you can have them. So initially, these are very important for every component. So whenever you design a component related metadata means information about the component is present inside the component decorator. Understood? Inside this component decorator, it contains component metadata. If anybody asked you a question in interview, right, what component metadata contains? Component metadata contains information about selector, information about template, the template URLs, styles, style URLs, lot of other things will be there, animations, modules, others. So as of now, these are basic things, right? Generally, this is the basic structure of component. So finally, how to create a component. Final. You saw level by level what it should contain. Finally, we can add a file called home.component.ts. Because TypeScript files will have extension TS. You can give any name, but for components, it should have a suffix called component. Earlier it was not mandatory, but now in the latest releases of Angular, they made it mandatory that the components must have the suffix component. Remember, component is not extension. It is only secondary name. Extension is what? TS. This is that suffix name, just suffix name. Secondary is that TS actually, that is extension. So component is not extension, just it is a part of name. But to tell that it is a component, we have to define it as component as suffix. Now, how to design component? So first, we have to import. What to import? Component from which location? @Angular/core library. After that, we have to design the component marker. In this, basically, we will use two things. One is selector. Selector I will give as app home. Understood? And next is template. Template I will give here heading as home. Like this we design. These two are enough. If you want to apply style, we can apply. I will give you that. This is enough actually. Now we have to define export class component. This is which one? Home component. In that we can put anything we want. We can put any logic. As of now, there is no logic. We can do one thing. Suppose we can put public title. It is a string type. In that we kept home. Do you know what you can do? If you want this title to display inside this heading, instead of keeping some standard value, what you can do is you can use a binding expression. I hope you already learned JavaScript binding expressions are kept in $curly brace. Here binding expression is in double curly brace. That is the binding expression. And here you can access the title. Understood? Whatever is there here, you can display here. We can access that and display here. So we have a component ready. In this component, so we have the selector app home, and after that we have a template. So the complete component is ready. But whatever the component you designed, those components are not used by your application. So what is the second step? This is first step. What is the first step? Step 1, you have to add a component like this. You have to add a file. Generally, in step 1, we have to add a component file. Where to add? In app folder. In our application folder, app folder, you have to add this component file. We have to add. Where this app is present in SRC, am I right? In SRC app folder, you have to add this component file. After that, you added this file, but this is not understandable to your application. Your application will not use this file. I told you now modular framework, Angular is. Modular framework means what you may have hundreds of library, but it will use only the library you mention. That means now the second step, step 2 is register your component in app.module.ts. I already told you now yesterday, application starts with main TS. Main TS will start with app module. In app module, you have a component called app component. That means you have to register your component in app module. In app module. That means when you go to this in app module.ts declarations, we have declarations. That means in app module.ts, you will find declarations. Declarations is an array. In the declarations, you have to register your component. And what is your component? It is home component. You have to register your home component in declarations. You see here, I will show you step by step how to create. We go to app folder. In the app folder, you will find app module.ts. Go to app module.ts. In that you see declarations is there. Here we have to add the component. That means every component that you designed will not be used by your application. Your application will use only the components that are defined in where? Declarations. So the components that you design, you have to keep them in the declarations. Along with other components. Don't delete other components, keep them. Because those components are also required. So you keep the other components and add your component also here. I will show you. We haven't added any component. We will add that, right? As of now, see, that is okay. Next step, what? After registering in the declarations, step 3 is configure your component as a startup component. Configure your component as startup component. You have to tell that application starts with my component. So how to do that? That you have to mention in Bootstrap. That you have to mention in Bootstrap. In Bootstrap, you have to mention your component, home component. You see there is an Bootstrap option. In the Bootstrap option, you have to tell. Yesterday I showed you. Bootstrapping means the process of converting the static DOM into dynamic. That means loading your application and making it ready so that you can start working with it. This process is called Bootstrap. And which component to start with, that you have to mention. And see, it is an array type. What does that means? It is an array type. It means that you can start with more than one component. You can put multiple components, because you see when you see the Netflix page, it have more than one component. It have a header component, it have a main component, it have a accordion component, am I right? It have footer component. Lot of components are there. That means a page doesn't contain only one component. A page may contain several components. And you can add all the components here if you want to start with all of them. That is important. Okay, still not finished. Where this component should be displayed? A component will not start directly. What we have to do, you have to set your component in index page. Understood? That means you have index.html. In index.html body section, we have to set your component. What is your component? App home. You have to access your component here like an element. You have to define it. Understood? Now your component is ready. Your component is ready. You can start with your components. Let's do all this and see practically. Right? Let's do all this and see practically. Let's go first step. First step, we have to add a component. So let's go to add component. Always add component in app folder. Now in app folder, already one component is there. Forget about this component. As I told you, every component have 3 files. Including a test file, there will be 4 files. There will be a testing file also. So there are several techniques of designing component. I will tell you those techniques. See, usually this is the component which is already there. We will add our own component. Then we will not disturb. We will create screen in such a way that it will not disturb with other components. So let's do one thing. In app folder, I am adding a new folder called components. So what we will do is, we will keep all our components in this folder, in the components folder. Now remember, actually, so here this is very important. You can design any component in Angular using two techniques. One technique is inline documentation technique. Another one is code behind documentation technique. We have 2 types of techniques: inline documentation, code behind documentation. What is difference is, inline documentation comprises of presentation, logic, and styles all in one file. Understood? All in one file. Currently the design I showed you, it is inline. That means logic is inside the file, design also inside the file, and the styles also inside the same file. If all are present in one file, that is inline. Code behind means, code behind allows to design component in 3 files. Understood? So what is the first file? HTML, another file CSS, another file TS. 3 files. What is advantage of inline? What is advantage of code behind? When to use them? Which one is best? It is not like which one is best, both are required, depending on situation. Suppose, what is good about inline is everything is present in one file. If everything present in one file, it will reduce the number of requests. As a web developer, you know that when number of requests are reduced, then page load time will be improved. Right? So that is one advantage. But problem is, if everything is present in one file, it is hard for testing. It is hard for extending. Suppose you want to extend your logic, you want to extend your presentation, then it becomes difficult because tightly coupled. Everything in one file. but it reduces the number of requests. So when you need this, when you want to design some component which doesn't require regular extensions, once you designed, it is final. Forever it is used in the same way. In that case, better we can go with inline. For example, I will show you here. Suppose we have a header component. Is this header component changing? Forever it will be same, right? So that means at least see here 2 languages are there, English, Hindi. So until or unless they don't introduce one more language, right, you need not to change this. That means this component is used in the same way for several days, several months, right? That means there is no extension required, no change required. In that case, this is inline is good. What about this register? This is also inline is good, because this is the same form every day. Forever it is the same form. That's good. What about this part? This part cannot be static. This part cannot be inline because it is changing regularly. Some new movies will come, they will put those new movies information, this will be changing. And what about this one? This is also standard. It will not change regularly. Rules and terms and conditions all are same every time. They don't change. What about footer? That is also stable. So if any component doesn't require regular extensions, better design inline. But you cannot do that in some websites. Suppose Amazon is there. When you open Amazon, can you make this cards standard? No. Every day these will be changing. We need regular extensions. In that case, so inline is not good for them. Inline is not good for them. That means if regular extensions are required, then better go with code behind so that you can easily extend your logic or presentation or styles, right? That is why you will see both techniques, how to use inline and how to use code behind. So let's see. First, I will show you an example of inline technique. Inline technique. We will see inline technique. Let's go. First step. So in the components, let's add a TypeScript file, add a new file. And what is the name? I will give the name as home.component.ts. Okay, how it becomes a component? Just now we learnt all the step by step. First we have to import. Import what? Component. From where? Angular /core. Am I right? From Angular core we have to import. So we have to import from Angular core library. We need to do that. It is there. Now after that we have to create a class. Export class. Class is what? Home component. Class name you can give anything, right? Now in this we have a title which is a string type, and we will put some data, that is home page, right, like this. Now I have to, this is still not a component. To make it a component we have to use a marker, am I right? We have to use a marker, component marker. In this we need attributes, object. So object have key and value. What are the keys? We need a selector. What is the selector? App home. That is the selector. Still it is showing error because a component is incomplete without template. Template is compulsory. So we will put another template. Template. See, it is showing error without template means it is using a contract. Am I right? So why it is showing error? Because it is maybe using a contract. It is using a contract. In that contract, it should display all those rules, right? So template, I told you, template means you can design directly here. Currently we are using inline technique. So we will use string, single quote, double quote or backtick. I will use backtick so that I can put expressions. I can put some embedded expressions. In this, what I will do, I will put a heading and close. In the heading, I will keep this title. How to do that? We have to just use a binding expression. Here we have to access the title. You can add anything. I will put a paragraph, understood? I'll put a paragraph. So here I will display as, so welcome to Angular. That is the message. And very important, if you want some styles, this is enough actually. This is enough. First, now, is this understandable to your application? No. What we have to do, go to app module.ts. Here in declarations, we have to use it. But in order to use it, first we have to import it. Am I right? We have to import. Which component to import? Home component. And it is imported from your components folder. Right? And this home component we will keep here. There is no order, but keep your home component here. Now, next step, I want to start with my home component. Then in the Bootstrap, we have to change it to which component? Home. I want this component to render in the index page. So we have to go to index. In index, we have to change this. Instead of app root, we have to use app home. This is ready. That means we designed a component and we made that component in the startup. So let's run this and see. Now how to run the project we already know. Ng serve project is equal to shopping. S is shortcut for serve. Ng serve. So project shopping. Now whenever, remember, all should correctly match. In the Bootstrap, you mentioned home component, but in the home page, index page, you haven't mentioned its selector. It will show error. That means it should match what you mentioned in Bootstrap. That must be inside index. You have to use that. And you cannot use any component without declarations. That means you have to first register in declarations. Right? Now this is manually adding a component, and by using which technique we are manually adding? By using inline technique. Inline technique means everything present in one file. Okay, let's see, it is compiling. Yeah, so it is compiled successfully. Now let's launch this in the browser. So localhost 4200, it will directly get with your component that you designed, home page. That means whatever the component that we designed, it will come here. Now in this we don't have any styles. So let's put some styles. So let's go. And here home component, how to add the styles, comma, we have to put styles. Styles in an, styles is a collection, array. In that, wherever heading is there, you know how to write the styles. Wherever heading is there, I will put color as some red, right? And here we will put a semicolon. So we put some text align as a center like this. This is one. That means automatically you see it will apply that effect there. We can add styles. We can configure the styles. Suppose I want one more. Then again another. This is time for paragraph. I defined some color as blue. So I just define that color as blue and you can see that will be applied there. I'm just using some plain styles just to make you understand how we apply the style, right? This is how we design a component. But this time by using which technique? by using inline technique. So what are the steps here? We have to first go to app folder and add a subfolder by name, which name? Components. Next step, add a new TypeScript file into components. And what is the TypeScript file name? home.component.ts. In this file, you have to put all this logic, because everything is in one file only, na? In this file, we have to put all the logic. Okay. Next step, step 3. Next step, go to app.module.ts. So here, what we have to do? Declarations. In declarations, you have to put which one? Home component. That is one. Another location is there. What is it? Bootstrap. In Bootstrap also, you have to keep home component. Understood? So now, along with others, so keep others along with them, you keep this one also. It's not that you delete everything else and put only this, right? Yeah. Next option is we have to do one more work. Go to index.html. In index.html, in body section, we have to use app home. That is the selector, how we can use that app home, and close the body. This is inline technique and it is working fine. Let's design another component. Let's design another example using code behind technique. Code behind technique, actually, every component contains 3 files: the HTML, CSS, and TypeScript. Let's go to the component now. Let's go to the components folder. Because now every component have 3 files, we will do one thing. We will maintain a subfolder for every component. Suppose I will give login. Understood? Because now every component we will have 3 files, so we will not mess up with others. So we will keep them in a separate folder. So in components, for every component, better to maintain a separate folder. Now in this login folder, add 3 files. First file, login.component.ts. There is no order in adding your files. Okay. Next file, login.component.html. Understood? And another file, third file, login.component.css. Now we need 3 files. So now let's go to the TS file. TS file logic. How to do that? Import. What to import? Component from. Okay. From where? @Angular/core. Okay. After that, export class. What is the class name? Login component. In this, I will put here a public title as a string. I will say user login. I will use single quotes everywhere. Okay. Yeah. Now this need to be marked as component, @component, and the component have selector. What is the selector? App login. Now this time we have template URL, because presentation is not designed here. It comes from a separate HTML file. And how to access that file? You can access from anywhere you want, right? But here it is in the same folder. You know that same folder is accessed by /. // indicates same folder. One level back means .. We have to use // in that login.component.html. That is what it contains. What about styles URL? Style URLs. Style URLs is an array. Here, which file? / login.component.css. That is ready. Now we have to design our HTML and CSS. So let's go into the login. I am creating a div. and I will put a class called container. You learned CSS now? You can give any class name. I am using container, and inside this I design a form. Now inside this I am using a simple data list with a data term. So like username, data definition, input type is equal to text. Similarly, just design password and data definition, input type is equal to password. And after that I will just put a button, say login. Like this we design. Now for this we want to add some styles. We want to add some styles for this, right? Then go to CSS. In the CSS, wherever container comes, we will use display as flex. We will use justify content center, align items center, and we will keep the height as 400 pixels. This keeps everything center on page. That is in CSS generally. After that, wherever form is there, we will put border as 2 pixel solid, some dark cyan color, and we will put some padding as 20 pixel. That's enough. So I will put some box shadow as 2 pixel, 2 pixel, 2 pixel, and suppose black. That is the shadow I define. Now here, this is the effects we have done. Now let's go to app module. We have to import that here. Which component? Login component. Our Visual Studio Code have IntelliSense. It will automatically import. If not, you have to manually do it. Okay. In Bootstrap, we have to change which component? Login. And in index, we have to change which component? Login. As of now, we will use only one. Later, we will see multiple. Login. Now you can see that the login component is ready here. Refresh this page and it is there. So we designed a simple login screen here. We designed a simple login component here, but this time we are using a code behind technique. In this presentation separate, design separate, logic separate, a user login is not there now. I will do one thing. So here in HTML, in this form, we will put a heading, and here I will bind what is the title. Actually, title is present in another file, but this is linked to it, where we linked in component metadata, right? Then automatically it can use that and display user login. This is a simple design to understand how it exactly designed, how it works. This is code behind technique. Only one difference is you separately design everything, right? So in this, what we have to do first, add a new folder into components. The folder name we give as login. Now add following files into login folder. What are the files? Login.component.ts, login.component.html, login.component.css. You have to do this. And first login.component.ts. In this TS, we have to design all this logic. I will copy and paste. Next, login.component.html. In HTML, we have to design all this, right? Next, login.component.css. In CSS, I am adding these styles. I am writing these effects. And no need to tell every time that go to app component and register and put it in Bootstrap. That you have to do regularly. So this is the design. We have inline technique and we have code behind. But instead of using lot of manually writing CSS, we can depend on third-party styles that generally every web developer have to do. When you go to interviews, whether it is Java, .NET or anything, if you say, I am a Java full stack or .NET full stack developer and I know Angular, Then what they do is in interviews, once you are qualified in the first level, now in the next level, they have to conduct a practical test to you. Then what they do is they will give you 2-3 days time. The practical test, it is not like they will give a computer and say, sit and design and show me. It's not like that. It will never happen like that. They will simply say that you are qualified. We will send a task to you. You have to design and send us back. Right? And you can take 2-3 days time. And they are confident enough that you may take help of other people and you may design it, but still they have confidence that it is difficult for you. Such tasks they give. And in those tasks, majority, how they give the task is, in your Java and .NET, they will ask you to create a database. Means using your MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, create a database. And in Java.NET, create a web service or API. Create a web service or API in your .NET and Java. And through the API, access the data. And in Angular, present them. That means in the front-end presentation, they will give you screens. They will say that design these screens using Angular. But Angular alone cannot design. Angular requires a good combination of CSS, HTML. That means where people fail majority is they know how to communicate with the database, APIs. They fail in presentation. Majority people fail in presentation only. Why? Because in the presentation they will say that you have to design a grid. In that grid you need a edit button, delete button, view button, search button, and those have to perform filter, sorting, searching in data. That means your data is in database, your API is in Java and .NET, and in the presentation very perfect HTML, CSS along with Angular. So that is the task generally given for all you full stack people in the current generation at MNC levels also. In MNC level practical tests also, they give the same thing. They will sometimes they will say that you don't need to use your Java or .NET. So we already have our API. In that we have data. Use that data and design this presentation. They will ask that. That means sometimes you don't need to design with your own database. They have already database, APIs and all. They will just give you the link. You have to design the screens and present them. Majority of you full stack people's practical tests will be in the same way. And majority of practical tests, they will ask like design CRUD operations, create, read, delete, update operations and give. Right? So that is the reason you must be perfect in your presentation also. Not just learning the logic. So very good in presentation. So writing lot of CSS and presenting like this is not enough. So how you will achieve this kind of presentations? How you will achieve this kind of registration form? Right? How you can design such type of buttons? Actually for that, we have Angular have separate component library. And majority of web developers depend on one more library. We have Bootstrap. Understood? You learned Bootstrap? So you have to learn Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a library for CSS and HTML. It is mandatory that every HTML learner must have knowledge of Bootstrap. Mandatory, not option. Because every project uses Bootstrap. And every project depends on some Bootstrap components. And Bootstrap is easy in designing styles and effects. Now we will see how to set up this Bootstrap so that we can design in a better way. So let's see how we can make this in a easy and more effective in presentation. For that we need Bootstrap. So how to set up Bootstrap for Angular? So set up Bootstrap for Angular. Let's see how to do that. And why to set up Bootstrap for Angular? To make presentations effective. To make presentation effective. For that first step, you have to install Bootstrap and icons for project. You have to install Bootstrap and icons. Icons is a special library you have to install like this. You open your workspace. This is your workspace. In your workspace location, you have to use npm install Bootstrap and save. You have to use another command npm install Bootstrap icons and save. You have to install these two, Bootstrap and Bootstrap icons. These icons are used for special symbols and icons that you need in web design. And recent generations, every web developer must have knowledge of these two, mandatory. Okay, now once you install, let's install. Open the terminal. You see in our terminal, already our project is running now. Don't disturb that. You can take another terminal. In another terminal, you can run these commands, right? So here, I will add another terminal here. You click on this, another terminal will come. Here we have to use npm install, what to install? Bootstrap, save. Okay. We are downloading Bootstrap and installing here. Now once we downloaded that Bootstrap, then we will install one more library, that is Bootstrap icons. Right, it is done. npm install Bootstrap icons save. We are installing Bootstrap and Bootstrap icons. Okay, after installing, generally they have CSS files. Usually, if you want to use CSS files in any page, we have to link them in section, head section, body section, we link them. But in Angular projects, if you want any CSS to use globally across every component, then what you have to do is, after installing, you have to go to styles.css file. You have to go to the styles.css file. You see in your project, there is a styles.css file in src. In src folder. You see in src folder, there is styles.css. I told you yesterday that it contains global styles. Open that styles.css. Here you have to write the styles or import the styles. We have to import all the CSS files here. How to import? Import. Import where it is present. Generally, Bootstrap files, when you install, they are in node modules. We discussed yesterday, all library files are in node modules. How to access? // will come out of src. Again // it comes out of projects. It comes out of shopping. // now you have node modules. You have to come 2-3 levels outside. Node modules. Here we have Bootstrap. In Bootstrap we have dist. In dist CSS. In that bootstrap.css. This is the file we have to include. Anybody, you learned Bootstrap, you know that Bootstrap file location is this. This is global. For every technology, Bootstrap files are present in node modules, Bootstrap, dist, CSS. Another file we need to import. Import // node modules, Bootstrap icons in that font, in that Bootstrap icons.css. Now, once you set up these two files you have to add. These two files you have to add in the styles.css folder. In the styles.css file, you have to add these two lines. Once you done this, you see some change happened in your presentation. Some change already happened in your presentation. That change is nothing but font style little bit changed. And this data terms become bold. And now Generally, people who know Bootstrap, they can directly apply effects by using simple classes. Like, suppose let's go now into the component HTML. For this text box, I will use a class called form control. Form control is a class used for text boxes and passwords. You see class form control, and you can see that this text box appearance will change. I want to change the button appearance. Then I will use a class called btn primary, like this. Primary. These are Bootstrap classes. I will put here W100, that is actually width 100, that will fit like this. This is Bootstrap. Actually, we can apply these kind of effects also easily with Bootstrap without writing much CSS. For example, for the form, so actually there is a form, right? Yeah. So we have a form here. And for the form, we can apply the class like we have rounded. We have like rounded 3. And you can see there will be a rounded here. Rounded. So you can see some rounded corner will come. These are all actually Bootstrap. And see here heading, user login is there. Just beside the title, I will put a span and a class bi person fill. I am giving like this. Actually, these are Bootstrap icons. Generally, HTML Bootstrap you have to learn. CSS Bootstrap you have to learn. And these are Bootstrap icon classes. It will give that user icon. We can put those icons and we can design. So, learning web development and designing is not just logic. Presentation is important, right? If you say that I am Angular, I know Angular, React like technologies, but I don't know proper HTML, CSS, that means you cracked the biggest joke in the world. Joke of the year. Seriously, what you are talking about? What you are talking about? You are an Angular developer but don't know HTML, CSS, Bootstrap. It's like joke. Right? Seriously. Because even Java.NET developer says that I don't know CSS, HTML, that is not satisfying. Because you are a Java.NET developer, you have to build very rich web applications and you say you don't know proper HTML, CSS, Bootstrap. No, you will not fit. You will not fit. We don't want only Java developers. We don't want only .NET developers. They need good presentation skills. Right? Even today, so several experienced people who are facing this type of problem, they are coming to learn UI technologies, you know. UI technologies means Java developer, .NET developers. So all these developers who are already developers, why you joined full stack course? Because these days we don't want specialist surgeons. We want RMP doctors. You know RMP doctor? He can give medicine for any disease in the world. If government gives permission, he will do heart operation also. Right? We want such people. We don't want white elephants. That means Java developer, he don't know anything other than Java. No, we don't want such people. We want a person who has skills in end-to-end design. From presentation to database, he must have knowledge. Earlier it's okay. Now current generation, no. That is the reason even senior people who are working in companies, they are sent to learn the front-end technologies and come because they have to manage them by themselves now. So several our batches of UI technologies and all, React, Angular and all, we see so many experienced people learning again these UI technologies because they are not perfect and company wants them to manage that. That means these days only specialist Java .NET developers cannot survive and there is no place for them. We want full stack end-to-end development. Means he must have experience in from database to presentation. And you must have good presentation skills. Okay. You have to learn very well JavaScript, HTML and CSS. Bootstrap, because this is very important. So in Angular, React like technologies, more effective interfaces will come. In some companies interviews, they ask like design a dashboard. You will see this in several interviews. They ask design a dashboard. Dashboard means when anybody, suppose manager logs in. So a dashboard for manager should come. That means how much sales happened this month, this year, graphs, charts, all diagrams, very effective interface we have to design. And that is requiring a lot of these skills. Okay. So you haven't learned, you learn them, right? You learn Bootstrap, you learn CSS good. That is very important in creating all this. Okay. Now I'm using little bit of Bootstrap here. Once we are doing with the Bootstrap, and now with Bootstrap we can create presentation like these all things we can easily design. Suppose we have Netflix, Amazon like forms. Suppose I want to design like this screen, understood? Like this register form. We can easily design that. We can easily design these kind of screens. We will do one thing. We will try to design this entire page. Yesterday I told you we will design. But for that first you have to learn components. Once you learn components, then you can design. Suppose see, I want to design like just for roughly your understanding sake. I will copy this HTML code. After doing the modification, change your HTML layout, right? In HTML layout, this is the code. I'm extra using some Bootstrap. Let's do one thing. I will remove this. Okay. And let's see here. I'm creating a container, means just a div. So in this div, I will remove all these effects also. Okay. So no more CSS. Here I'm just using an empty. I will put an input type is equal to email. And beside that, I will put a button. So button is having, so get started. And we have a span. So class BI chevron right. You see, actually, we designed something like this. We just created that. That means, for example, see here, we created like this, and actually I will keep a heading for you to understand that Netflix. Okay. This is Netflix. Okay. We need to keep it like a Netflix design style. We will do one more work here. We will say container fluid. It is actually the appearance like this. And see, for this we have a class called form control. And for this button we have a class btn danger. And here div is having a class called, it is having input group, and we have input group sm, and we have LG large, and we will use BG dark, and we will put padding 3 or 4, and that gets some space actually, and you can see that is the design. We created like a Netflix register form what they have. Right at the top, they can have some paragraph here. They had a paragraph here. No? That means actually we have to keep this another content. Huh? Right. Actually, they have some paragraph here. And what the paragraph contains, usually ready to watch all this. Huh? So that means I am keeping that paragraph there, and I say text as a white. Usually it comes like this. We need to bring it in a new line. Then actually what we have to do is this input group, this part, we have to keep under this. Understood? In another container, we have to keep the class as input group and input group SM, LG, and it will give like this. The presentation will be in this. And for this paragraph, we will use the class text center. It will give the appearance in this. That's how we design. With the height, in the next level, we will design the page, right? But these kind of designs can be easily done by using Bootstrap. That is the reason without Bootstrap like technologies within skills, you can't be an Angular developer. Because all the professional web applications built with Angular, React, they depend on a lot of Bootstrap CSS. And you need to achieve those designs, right? This is just one example. This is just another example for like Netflix, like register, we created a page. Right now what we will do is with the help of Bootstrap and all that knowledge, we will try to design this entire screen. Background photo, dominating with the background black color and designing these titles and design this register, making the header reusable component. We will try to design this screen with multiple components. Currently our page is using only one component. Now we will try to use multiple components and design like this. That we will see tomorrow in the next session, right? First you need to practice this. Then in the next session we will design this. Tomorrow first itself we will start this design. Okay, right? Tomorrow we'll continue.